Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Tanya Smagaki. I'm head of community and partnerships here at Vantage Ventures. For those of you who are new to our community, Vantage Ventures was born out of the John Chambers School of Business and Economics at WVU. It serves to launch high-impact, scalable businesses that tackle complex problems here within the Mountain State. We are home to a fearless new generation of entrepreneurs. Joining us for our first executive clubhouse of 2022 are two of our esteemed guests and West Virginia natives as well as alum. First, we have Gary LeDonne, our executive in residence at WVU John Chambers School of College of John Chambers College of Business and Economics, as well as retired partner at Ernst & Young. Our second guest is co-CEO of Schneider Downs, Chris McElroy. Thank you both for giving your time today and joining. Please join us for this interactive discussion. We want to hear about their diverse experience in the business world. This beginning of this panel will be moderated. We are recording it to start, but then we're going to move to an open Q&A session. We look forward to a rich interactive discussion. So Gary, to start, what would you classify as the most defining leadership quality behavior from an entrepreneur?
You know, I'm going to describe it as an opportunistic visionary. And I have a perfect example of a successful entrepreneur who I think epitomizes this. And in full disclosure, she's my cousin. She's actually had a lot of successful business ventures, but entrepreneurs oftentimes see opportunities that others don't. And one of the more successful businesses that she created was a company called TheraPearl. And the way it came about is her daughter had her wisdom teeth taken out, and when the dentist basically said, you know, just put a pack of frozen peas on it to deal with it. Well, a lot of people would probably just do what the dentist said, and she did that in the short term, but it popped an idea that says, you know, there's got to be something more sophisticated than frozen peas to deal with the need for hot or cold product, you know, compresses, types of things. And so she saw the opportunity, created a company, went through the natural cycle of any startup business where, you know, you're raising funds and eventually you have an exit strategy. That's just one example. So I think it's an important trait, just being able to see an opportunity, fill a need that's necessary.
So ventures, this question is going to Chris. Ventures based on a good strategy can survive confusion and poor leadership. But sophisticated control systems and organizational structures can't compensate for an unsound strategy. So Chris, what is your playbook for molding a solid, clear company strategy?
All right, thanks, Tanya. Good evening, everyone. So, you know, for me, a solid, clear company strategy starts with, what is our purpose? Why are we here and what are we doing? So, you know, for us right now, there's a lot of consolidation in the accounting industry, and recently private equity has entered this sector for the first time. So here at Schneider Downs and where we sit, you know, we're very attractive to many of the very large firms. We're highly profitable. We have significant market share in strategic markets that is attractive for many of these firms. However, we very much like who we are, and we want to remain a vibrant, independent firm where we can control our own destiny and really best preserve our culture, which is one that's built on care and collaboration and this, what we call a we-me mentality. So, okay, if remaining successful and an independent firm is our overarching goal, how are we going to do that? So shortly after I transitioned to this role, we developed a long-term strategy, which we call, and I'm sure Gary will get a kick out of this, we call it Vision 2030, okay? And that vision lays out our roadmap of the 3 pillars that we need to focus on in order to remain independent. It's around growth by leveraging our deep industry experience and making some big bets in the consulting space, like in technology and cybersecurity. It's about talent, acquisition, development, and retention of talent, which is front and center in the midst of this great retirement or resignation, if you will. And then really looking at operational excellence, which includes being very strategic and mindful of what we're working on. So all that's the easy part, identifying our why first and developing our roadmap to achieve that result. The hard part is then communication, buy-in, and execution. And the key to this, to me, is continually reminding people what we're doing and why we're doing it. You can't really do this enough. And the second part is making people feel as if they're part of the process, so that it's our strategy and not just Chris's strategy or the CEO's strategy.
So Gary, what are your basic questions that an entrepreneur must ask in preparation for a business venture?
Well, there are several that need to be considered. I think the first one kind of goes with my first example. Do you really have something that is unique? Do you have a product that's filling an existing need, or even better yet, maybe some of the most successful visionary entrepreneurs, take Steve Jobs, for example. We didn't realize we needed iPhones until he convinced us that we needed iPhones. And not too long ago, I heard a quote from Henry Ford that basically said, well, if I would have asked the population what they needed, they would have said faster horses. And so, you really need to think about do you truly have something different that is a viable business or a viable service, a viable product, whatever business you're trying to launch? That to me, Tony, would be the first question. And then the second one is there anybody else already doing it? And how can you have a competitive advantage if there are already people in there? Or oftentimes someone will start a business and then it obviously causes others to jump in. So then the third point would be, what are the moats, I'll call them, around the business that can keep you from, can keep your business safe as safe can be in terms of, not allowing others to capture your market share, capture your margin. You could look at something such as a patent. Obviously, if you have something that strong, that could be a strong moat, or some kind of a copyright, or you just have a much better mousetrap. You look at Google. Obviously, they had a better algorithm than everybody else when it came time to start searching on the internet. So those are the three initial ones, and then there's the practical question of, where we're going to get the money. And every business kind of goes through this cycle. A lot of businesses start with, I'll call it, friends and family, and you can only do that for so long. And eventually then you have to go to some other source. And the more common sources might be angel investors or venture capital types of investors. And that is one of the areas, at least in West Virginia, that we're a little short on right now, is VC funds. You look at the big funds that are obviously on the two coasts. And so those are the practical questions you need to think about. And I don't know, for me, sometimes when it comes down to really getting your thoughts together, I find putting it on paper or capturing it in your computer is helpful. So, developing a business plan that starts to think about all these types of things. How much money do you need to get to the first level? I'm involved with a business right now. I'm on the advisory board of a graphite company, and in the company, the operations are in Brazil. And we are right at this inflection point now of having to go out and raise funds to get the mine in operation. And so, it's a practical stage that every business has to deal with. And, banks are not as quick to lend money to startup businesses, obviously.
Thank you. So Chris, in your opinion, what are a few things that really drive results for a company?
All right, great question, Tanya. So I'm going to go back to the need for clear and continuous communication, and then finding those people or leaders within your organization that can see your vision and help you execute and drive results. And I'll give a specific example. I attended a conference in July of last year, and one of the speakers was the author of a book called Exponential Organizations. Many of you may have read it, where he talked in part about specific companies and the strategies that they employed to drive accelerated or exponential results. So one of the things that the author highlighted was the idea that you don't drive change or results through the core of the organization, but create smaller teams that are likely to embrace change and have them introduce and drive change and achieve success through a subset of the organization, almost like a parallel organization, and then bring those findings and the proven results back into the core business where accelerated results can then be achieved. So just taking it another step, I was in August of last year, Steve Thompson, the other co-CEO, and I, we were onboarding some new shareholders onto our board of directors. And we wanted to provide a state of the union or a deeper dive into our Vision 2030 strategy. Just get it all in one place and let's take this deep dive as a board. And the meeting was fine, and we got some really good feedback, as we always do, but typically skews towards, don't forget about this or be careful of that. But, there really, I would say, wasn't maybe that level of, additional insight or vision or even energy around our discussion that I was hoping for. And so, my general impression perhaps coming out of the meeting was, perhaps sometimes we're too encumbered by, those that have been in an organization for a long time of, what was, or trying to explain why we did things the way we did them, than being able to see what things could be. So we had a little bit of an aha moment, Steve and I, and said, why don't we think about the exponential organization and create what we call a mirror board, a board comprised not of senior leaders and elected members of a board of directors, but let's get a group of the newest shareholders and have the exact same discussion with them. Well, we found it to be incredibly insightful. They had great ideas, tremendous energy, great enthusiasm, and we were able to quickly get buy-in into the why we were doing it, and they were excited about it and wanted to participate in it. So then we continued these small group meetings throughout the summer and just actually wrapped up the last round of meetings last night. We had 52 shareholders. We went through this process with all of them in probably groups of 6 or 7. And so in doing so, we got a lot of great insight, what resonates with the group and where we have work to do. But at the end of the process, we also figured out who gets where we're trying to go and who can help us carry the ball and cascade and execute our vision and strategy. And we're putting those people in positions to lead. And we're starting to see where that is starting to drive results and hopefully accelerated and exponential results.
Excellent. So Gary, what would you say would be some of the most important attributes of successful leaders today? And I guess you could say you were a leader because you said back in the day you hired Chris.
Well, thank you. Chris was one of the best hires that I made, by the way. When I was at EY, I was the managing partner, and I was fortunate enough to bring Chris in as a partner back when I was in the Columbus office. And I will answer your question in a minute, but I wanted to add on to something that Chris said. This idea of carving off a smaller group within an organization is something that we're actually doing at MVB Financial. I serve on the board of MVB Financial, and MVB is really focused in the fintech space. And we have literally carved off a separate subsidiaries actually to incubate new businesses. And they are under the parent organization, but they're not part of the bank. And that's by design to give them that kind of autonomy, Chris, that you're talking about, to allow them to develop new and innovative businesses and do that in a way that is less encumbered by infrastructure. But anyway, to answer your question on the leadership points, you can look at all kinds of lists about different leadership qualities. And I don't know, as I've looked at different ones over the years and different books that I've read, and I think integrity's got to be at the top of the list. I mean, I'm a big fan of Warren Buffett, and his list is pretty straightforward. There's only 3 points on it: integrity, intelligence, and energy. But the clincher is, if you don't have the first one, the second 2 can get you in trouble. And so, it makes a lot of sense. And so I think leaders need to be able to motivate people and drive them toward the vision, and then surround themselves with the right people to make that happen. We all have different skill sets, and not all visionary leaders are the best at maybe the operational side of the business, particularly once the business morphs. I mean, you look at, it happens all the time. I mean, Google brought in Eric Schmidt because they had the great vision of the leaders and the founders, but they didn't have the right skill set to take that business to where it is today. Now Schmidt's obviously rolled out and the business is doing very well as Alphabet, but yeah, I think those I have to totally agree with Warren Buffett on the priority though, integrity, intelligence, and energy. And intelligence, I'll just take it one step further. It's not pure IQ. I mean, sometimes too smart's not too good. You can kind of overthink things and get your own way. I think having both IQ, but balancing that out with the appropriate EQ and having common sense and strong communication skills are really some critical factors to leadership, Tanya.
Thank you. So Chris, with any business venture, success relies on paying attention to important aspects of running a business, which includes everything from establishing adequate customer support system to smart strategies for scaling up. Do you have any other companies or business models that you really like and admire?
Yeah, so I'm probably not going to answer this question maybe the way it was intended. And again, I like to tell stories, and I think of a story, and actually like it picks up a little bit on Gary's earlier kind of comment about Apple. I lived in New York City in the late 1990s and continued to come and go for business for several years, well into the 2000s, and in the mid 2000s, that 5-6 time frame, I think I remember walking from Midtown to the Upper East Side many times, and I was always amazed that the Apple flagship store that was there off of Central Park was always packed, day or night, it seemed like. And this wasn't unique to New York City. You'd see this in malls or stores anywhere you went at any day or time when the rest of the mall could be empty. You would always see the Apple store was packed. And I think the brand and cult-like following obviously was impressive, and you then could see what happened to Apple stock over the course of the last 15 to 20 years. And in hindsight, we all, and maybe hopefully some of us saw it coming, but we all should have seen that coming from the strong, brand acceptance. And Gary noted that Steve Jobs told us taught us that we needed iPhones and iPads. But what I told myself, a handful of years ago is if I see that again, I'm not going to miss it next time. And so it was not until about 5 years ago when you saw the same type of, reaction or phenomenon with Tesla, in the standalone stores or mall stores. There just seemed to be this hyper interest in the product. And this time I bought some Tesla pretty early on. And in spite of all their other challenges with capital and manufacturing and everything else they seemingly couldn't get right, I bought it and I held on to it for quite a long time. And so in many ways, I admire how Elon Musk was able to disrupt a proven, well-established business model, because he saw an opportunity in the market to create a new and compelling brand that really exploited a need and opportunity. So for me, it's really about leading with a compelling product or solution, particularly where you're able to develop a passionate following. Now, it's hard to do, but when and if you can, and then you can disrupt business models and even overcome operational challenges. So I think Gary even noticed this earlier, for me, focus on the product and the market in the market first. Best in class customer service and support and supply chain won't overcome a bad product. So for me, I would say Tesla.
Thank you. So Gary, how would you define a great client relationship?
Well, I had the pleasure of working with you at EY for 30 years and serving a lot of different clients over that time frame. And I remember at one point I was meeting with different groups. So I'm meeting with the senior managers and the managers one day, and they're telling me how bad the staff and seniors are doing. Then I'm meeting with the staff and seniors another day for lunch, and they're saying how challenging it is working with the managers and senior managers. And ultimately, whether you're working inside the company or you're working with your clients, if you can ask and answer these three basic questions, I think you can provide good client service, which is what leads to this trusting client relationship, which, having an understanding of what is it you're delivering. In our business at the time, it was tax work. So are we doing tax returns? Are we doing tax opinions? What is it that the client's expecting of us? And what, the big one is managing expectations. When is the deliverable supposed to be provided? And if it's supposed to be provided on Thursday, don't wait until Friday to call and say, yeah, we're not going to get it to you. Managing expectations. I had a lot of interactions. We call it quality client service. Chris knows, because I met with a lot of his clients over the years, and he's in the position he's in because he's epitomizes quality client service. Inevitably, they would not say that EY got an answer wrong. If they were unhappy about something, it's because we didn't manage expectations. And so the third expectation to manage really is, what is the cost? So, if you're whatever your product is, you're billing clients for service or you're selling products, making sure there's a clear understanding of the cost, so that when someone gets the invoice, they're not surprised. That's a key part. And then, frank and honest communication. You can never go wrong with that. And I think if you do those things, Tanya, you usually have happy clients that you're going to keep for a long time. Chris, any thoughts on tacking onto that?
No, I think, well, first of all, those discussions where you talk with the seniors and then you go and you talk to the managers, those continue. But I think you're absolutely right. It comes down to really exceptional client service and aligning around expectations, early on, and not being able to, be afraid to have sometimes difficult conversations early. They don't get easier on the back end. So, and I think that's part of exceptional service. Yeah,
I was fortunate that as a senior, I got thrown into the frying pan with a client that we did all this extra work, and then the people above me on the account hadn't really been talking with them about the bill. And when it came time to send the bill out, it just went out. No one talked to the client, and we had a pretty unhappy client. And then, of course, the partner said, well, you should call and explain to her what happened. So that was quite a learning experience. The main takeaway was, don't ever send out a bill without talking with the client first. So, some basic things, and sometimes those lessons just tend to stick with you. And that one's definitely one that stuck with me throughout my career at EY.
Not a fun day, I'm sure.
No, but it was a good learning lesson.
We had a question come in. Could Chris and Gary share their observations on the role of culture in companies who are building disruptive products or services?
I can take a stab at that. Back to Schneider Downs and our strategy, and I think why I'll try to address this the best I can is the big impetus for our firm that's built on 65 years of this kind of smaller firm mentality. We wake up now and we're a major firm. We're a $100 million plus firm now, but we still have this very small firm, close-knit culture type environment that we're trying to keep. And it's a hard thing to do, is how do you thread the needle of continuing to embrace those key parts of your culture that got you where you are today, learning to let go of some other things that maybe aren't so critical, and then continuing to challenge yourself to drive forward and embrace those things that are really going to achieve your ultimate accomplishment or goal of, in our case, remaining this independent firm. And so it's really a challenge of continuing to stay connected to your core values, your mission. Ours is working together every day to make our clients, communities, and firm better. And we talk about it all the time because that's why we're here. That's what's important to us. And being able to hand the baton to the next generation is really critical to us as shareholders and to all 500 people in our firm, but you also have to be willing and able to, again, to let go of those things that really aren't truly making you better, so that you can embrace change and move forward. And that's an art, and that's something that, we work really hard at doing, is maintaining the key parts of our culture, and as we try to move the firm forward.
And I think, it starts at the top. I mean, everybody's looking to Chris and Steve as the leaders of their firm for what's the tone that they're setting. And that is so true, I think, of any organization. Culture starts at the top, and everyone's looking for leadership there. And whatever the firm's values are, you have to not just say it, but live it. And I think actually a lot of this came out and very clearly during the pandemic, how companies handled that, and the nimble companies handled it very well. And I think it's helped from a retention standpoint, and just a lot of those things. So people don't tend not to leave organizations. They often leave because they're maybe not happy with their boss or something along those lines, and that cuts to culture. But it absolutely, you have to walk the walk at the top of the house, and I think that's crucial.
So Gary, I have a question that came in. Environmental, social, and corporate governance, ESG, financing revolution is on, but how can entrepreneurs ride the wave? Shareholders, investors, customers, employers, and government agencies are showing an increasing concern for ESG issues. And companies that aren't on board with ESG principles are finding they're having to do a lot of, backtracking to capture capital. Corporations that are seeking more ESG investments to build their sustainable strategy might be more successful. Any feedback you could give to entrepreneurs listening regarding ESG, the values and strategic imperative?
Well, I think, obviously ESG is top of mind for my students out there, just to make sure we're all on the same page. ESG is the environmental concerns, carbon footprint, those types of things, social concerns, income inequality, addressing hunger, those issues. And then the G, the governance one, really gets a lot of attention in the public company sector. And so there you tend to the focus is often, do you have the proper diversity on your board and in the C-suite? Not just gender diversity, but ethnic diversity and age diversity. You want to have a cross section too of people from different generations, because we all approach things differently. And so, I think depending on where your company is in the cycle, ESG means different things. But where personally, I think for entrepreneurs, particularly people trying to start new businesses, you want to ride this wave, right? It does have a lot of momentum. And so think of a company like Bombas, okay, the sock company. One, they do make nice socks. And two, they give away a pair of socks for every one they sell. And that's just part of their mission. So, a lot of millennials and others, I think, are really into the ESG aspect of that. And that's a positive thing for their business plan. I look at the graphite business, and this is one where, and I just joined this advisory board about 6 months ago. And the reason I joined is it fits I can just see the potential because of the alignment with ESG. So if we think about it, environmental includes electric vehicles. Virtually every major auto manufacturer has said they're going to get to an electric fleet between 2025 and 2030. Well, all these cars, obviously, and trucks need batteries, which have a lot of graphite in them. And so there's a bolt-on, I'll call it, a bolt-on to the ESG movement with various types of businesses. And those are just two examples. I mean, there are so many things out there that ESG is pushing some momentum behind.
Thank you.
Hey, Gary, if you don't mind, I'll piggyback off of that. Where we are, again, situated, our clients tend to be, upper middle market, closely held businesses for all intents and purposes. So, when the focus on ESG really came out, the thought was, well, this is just for the big publicly traded companies. that are making public disclosures. And from an accounting firm perspective, there's an opportunity or service to come in and attest some of those disclosures the public companies are making. And so, well, that's the initial thinking was, well, that's probably not, not a play for us right now, where we're situated in the market. But I just came back from a major AICPA, which is the accounting industry professional conference for the 80 largest firms in the country, called Major Firms Group. And there was a couple breakout sessions on ESG, and it really opened my eyes because, those middle market, closely held businesses whose customers are publicly traded companies are going to need to be able to disclose this information, to their customers for public, for public communication. And so there's a real opportunity for, you're going to need it as entrepreneurs if your customers are going to be in the public domain. And, it's important to all stakeholders, whether they're investors, employees, to attract employees. And again, to your customers, you need to be able to provide this information. And for us, we see it as a, as a real opportunity that and a service that our customers are going to need, and a real opportunity for us as a firm. So I think you're right, Gary. ESG is front and center, and I think we're going to, see a lot in this area over the next decade.
So Chris, in your opinion, how can U.S. foreign policy support entrepreneurship as a path to economic growth in developing companies?
Yeah, this is a tough question, a good question. I'm certainly, I have a international tax background, so I'll just not come from that perspective, but just kind of from my own personal perspective. I think what we're seeing, a couple things, it doesn't really answer the question, but first and foremost, the war for talent is real, with the great resignation, and retirement that's going on. And I also understand from our industry experts that, there were 1.3 million fewer people enrolled in U.S. colleges and universities in 2021 than 2 years ago on a base of $15 million. So for us, the question is, where is the pipeline for U.S. talent? Where's it going to come from? So I think it's important, that we have the right, policies around immigration based on where gaps are in our labor markets. And, this can be a sensitive topic, but it's just my view is that we're going to have to, be progressive in our views and how we go forward. But to really, direct to the heart of the question around supporting economic growth in developing countries, I guess I would, again, not my areas of expertise, but some thoughts are, it seems like there's a tremendous opportunity for colleges and universities, to really build a bridge through technology with students and partner universities in developing countries to help develop, train, and support entrepreneurship abroad. That seems like a tremendous opportunity. And then having tax policies that allow U.S. businesses to import goods and or services from outside the U.S. Again, where we have gaps in our abilities to fully supply this demand domestically over the coming years. And then finally, global tax policies and other regulations that support the flow of capital and investment, into developing countries. So those are things that are top of mind to me.
We're winding down my final questions. I have one coming in. Well, this goes to both of you. Gary, if you had one piece of advice to an entrepreneur or a business starting out, what would it be?
Well, I think you want to surround yourself with good people. I mean, nobody can do everything. And you don't be afraid to surround yourself with people who are of a different view than what you don't want to have a lot of yes people. If everybody agrees with your approach and no one's pushing back, that's not the best situation. And that doesn't just mean employees, because sometimes having, when you're starting out a business, things can be pretty thin, and you don't really have the budget to have a lot of employees. So that could be an advisory board that you create with people with diverse skills and opinions, so that they can help to direct the company. Not only that, but also with just experience. This is where VCs come in a lot. Is once VCs invested They oftentimes are on the board and can provide that insight to help a company that is going through the process for the first time, where you've got a VC firm that's done it multiple times over. And so I actually read this book not too long ago. It's been on my shelf forever, but it's called the Startup Game. It's by a gentleman named William Draper. And he talks about a lot of family history because he has 3 generations of venture capitalists in the family: his father, himself, and his son. But there's a lot of nuggets in there. And so, those are some things that you might, if you're trying to start up a business, particularly if you think you're going to be going down the VC path at some point, you may want to take a look at it. The Startup Game by William Draper. I just read it last month, and I skipped over a lot of the family history, but I zeroed in on a lot of the do's and don'ts for entrepreneurs.
I'll answer that one as well. And it's funny, Gary, I had just some notes I jotted down before this I had the exact same thing. Surround yourself with smart people, with different backgrounds, different experiences, different perspectives. In our industry, in the accounting industry, leaders are often, if not always, people that have worked in this profession, even the same firm, their entire careers. And that's great. Typically working, like what we'll say, in the business and not on the business. But sometimes this can also limit, your breadth of experiences and perspective. And so I'm a big fan of bringing people in from the outside, or reaching out to people from different industries and different backgrounds to ask questions, pressure test what we're thinking and doing, and get insights and perspectives. So the other piece of advice is ask for help. You'll be surprised how people are willing and interested to provide help.
So a question came in, Gary and Chris, can you give examples of a challenge you were faced with, either with partners or employees or clients, and the strategies you deployed to find a solution?
Chris, do you want to go first, or do you want me to kick it off on this one?
Yeah, in this role, you have issues with, I'm sure Gary has many a story as well. You're thinking you always have, challenges or issues with employees, but they tend to be your partners in many cases. And, we have a great group of partners and shareholders, but, back to the point of, when I think of how you try to bridge, changes in generational leadership and culture, where you go from a firm that was, when several of our shareholders are now at the end of their career, were here when there were 10 shareholders, when there are 8 to 10 shareholders, and they were building the firms, and the people that built the firm, they had this culture and model where everybody was involved in all the decisions. And so how do you morph from that to an organization where you have 50 shareholders, and you need to have infrastructure and process around how you make decisions? And so it's really been, we're a little bit in an inflection point as we go from being that, really small, closely held kind of business where everybody's going to weigh in on everything, to one where we're trying to consolidate some of the decision making, but also at the same time providing that forum where people feel like they have a say, or people feel like they have a seat around the table to weigh in on decision making. And it can be hard. And along the way, sometimes you have to have difficult discussions with people, or difficult conversations that, the way we did it isn't the way that makes sense doing it in the future. And so we've had to have a number of those discussions along the journey. Maybe that's why we have 2 CEOs, because one person couldn't deal with all of that. That's probably part of our culture as well. But that's a big part of the job, is just moving the firm forward while not losing sense of what got us here. And that's a big part of what I do.
I think a lot of times you almost have to be an intermediary and try to figure out what each person is interested in. And here's the simplest example. I remember at EY, several times actually, but, I'm getting copied on all these emails back and forth between 2 partners. Finally, I just called timeout and said, can you please pick up the phone and talk? Because you're not making any progress sending nasty emails back and forth. And these are, senior people. And so, a lot of it comes down to there's some basic communications are at the core of all business. And, I could share a story with Chris where when we were trying to convince him, we brought him into the firm as a partner. And then he was in Pittsburgh, and we really felt like we needed him in Columbus. And I remember a lengthy dinner one night with Chris and a couple other partners where we were wooing him to make the move to Columbus, which he did, and it worked out very well. And now obviously he's found his way back to Pittsburgh, and that's working out well. But it was all about figuring out what is most important, and so that's the key to any problem resolutions. What's important to each side.
See here. Okay, very quickly, I have Gary and Chris. Has there been a time in your career where you've had to rely on a law firm for help?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, well,
go ahead, Gary.
whether it's an outside law firm or general counsel, I mean, sometimes it's just the right thing to do. And I remember I had a very involved tax fraud situation, and it would have been wrong for us not to involve a law firm.
Yeah, we find a lot of times, and you may have our outside counsels, let's say part of the team, but we have very close connection with our law firm that we leverage a lot. A lot of times you'll have matters related to shareholder agreements or non-competition type issues that'll pop up, where maybe some of the work for the firm is now soliciting clients. So you have those types of issues. You also have a lot of transactional related contract and transactions where you'll rely on legal counsel to make a review of contract and things of that nature. So having good legal counsel is a good part of the it's a great resource to have on the team for sure.
So we had a question come in about the infamous social media. What is your opinions? I know Glassdoor, some of these things can be scary out there for an employer, but what's your opinion on social media and the future role it is in shaping and improving culture?
I'll take that one, Gary. And
Good.
I'm certainly no expert on this one at all. I think one thing that we learned, we had this great, again, conference I just attended. We had a great professor. She came in, I think she was from Rice University, and it had to do with, talent and particularly talent around Gen Zs in the workplace. We probably have many that are, Gen Z on the call tonight, and millennials, and really, the role of social media, where Gary and I sit, we were all LinkedIn, and we're on LinkedIn, and, the thing is like, the generation's not, they're not on LinkedIn or looking at LinkedIn. It's really, in TikTok and other means. And so making sure we are, we're focused where and know what's happening on social media, and make sure that we have HR teams and resources that are really connecting with, how the, the current generations coming into the workplace, how they want to work, how they think, what they want from their careers, and continuing to open our minds to make sure we're creating a culture and environment that's attractive to, this next generation of folks that are coming into our industry. And so I think social media is a big part of that. I think it's a big part of how we also go to market in some ways. Using so the big thing in accounting services, you always had a physical presence. Like if you were going to go into market, you needed bricks and mortar and a physical presence, and you're going to open an office and you're going to have 30 people and build on, that team. And I think that that's still a big part of the strategy. I mean, we're going into Washington, DC, we're going into Cincinnati, two different ways, but, we could see, digital marketing, social media, and strategies as part of our plan of how we create a presence in those markets without bricks and mortar, and how we attract and create a presence without a physical presence, particularly around some of our services that are somewhat, we'll say, geography agnostic, like cybersecurity, the work we do in SOC reporting, our technology services like digital transformation and data analytics, research and development, tax credit work. We have some things that people don't care where you sit. And so if you can find a way to tap into that market without having to put a stake in the ground in terms of bricks and mortar, it's a useful tool in terms of like driving growth. So I think it plays a big role.
Yeah, I mean, the only point I'll add, and I'm certainly far from an expert on social media, but I mean, it has its place, and I don't think it's going away. I mean, I think we need to be careful, like anything else, how much time we dedicate to one medium or another. But you look at, particularly for small businesses starting up, Facebook Marketplace and some of the tools like SD. I mean, those are good for platforms for businesses to get their name out there and get their products out there. And so you have to start somewhere. And so, I think these things, it's like anything. I'm a firm believer that everything in life needs to be done in moderation. And so with social media, I'd put it squarely in that category.
Yeah, these are good, tough questions. I feel like I'm kind of in the ring with Mike Tyson here and just like trying to see if I can, rope a dope or like kind of outlast the clock here. So these are good, challenging questions, but keep them coming. This is great.
Okay, well, I'll have two more. One came in from Connor. I think this is one of Gary's students. In an already established business where over time purpose may have faded, how can you effectively remind your team members of what the purpose was?
I'm not sure I'm following the question. So in an established business where over time it may have faded, how? So are you saying that the business is losing energy, or what's really the core of the question, Connor? Maybe I'm missing something.
My question is, like, as time goes on, maybe the purpose has been clouded. Maybe the higher up positions haven't really been informing everyone of what it is. Maybe it's lost track of where it originally was. So how can you reinstill that in your team?
Okay, thanks for the clarification. I mean, I think any strategy needs to be refreshed from time to time. And then once that refresh happens, it needs to be rolled out and communicated. And how that happens is largely the size of the business. Chris mentioned Vision 2030. Well, he had a smile because at EY we had Vision 2020. And so I remember when that was a big strategy refresh. And so when that happened, it was from top to bottom, a very expensive rollout. Now, that's a multi-billion-dollar firm. You have a smaller business. I think you just need to bring everybody together and take a fresh look and say, look, we were headed down this path. It's time to maybe consider a different path. I mean, we're doing that at MVB. We're literally on the cusp of rolling out a new strategy. And it's probably been 3 years since we did it before. And it's just, otherwise, you're either moving forward or you're falling behind. So, there's no such thing as just kind of sitting there. And so sometimes in order to move forward, you need to throw out some of the old.
Connor, this is spot on to what our Vision 2030 is all about. So it's a great question, really resonates with me because you think we're an established business. And, for the founded in 1956, I would say the first 65 years, it was just like, get out there and build a business and probably grow and have fun together and probably make money, whatever was really driving it. And then the firm got to a point, and then like firms like ours, established businesses, they get to a point and then you come to a point where maybe that first generation of shareholders now and owners, they're retiring. And so did they build teams behind them to provide succession and move the firm forward? And, so when we came into Vision 2030, and I said at the onset is, our big why is the perpetuation of the firm and keep this going because we love who we are. We love our culture. We're able to have a big impact on our communities because our headquarters in downtown Pittsburgh, we have 400 people, 1 PPG. We're a dominant presence in our market, and we want to keep it that way. But when you try to message to people like that, hey, this isn't this isn't a right that we have to continue as a firm. It's like a privilege and it takes work. And I think for people, a lot of times they're like, this is a new concept to them, because the idea that, hey, if you don't continue to like grow, as Gary said, for a number of reasons, we continually have to attract talent, new services. There's rapid change in technology that wasn't happening 20 years ago. So you have to continue to grow to kind of feed that engine in order to sustain yourself. If not, you're dying. So you have to continue moving forward. And so the message is, okay, everybody wants to keep, wants this to continue to be Schneider Downs. And I do as much as anybody, but that takes work. And that's our big why now. And that's what's driving our vision, is the growth, the focus on people, the focus on operational excellence. The why has changed. It's not about just growing something, it's now sustaining and perpetuating something. And so that's a big part of the communication. And I think that opens some people's eyes, that if we don't do the things that it takes to move us forward, someone else will do it for us. And that's what I'm trying to get through to folks.
So Gary and Chris, we want to thank you. We have about 4 minutes left, I believe, for your time. We always end our sessions with a fun little tidbit here. Our final question, which we like to ask, is the commitment it takes to scale a business or be an entrepreneur is a lot like climbing a mountain. And of course, we have many of those beautiful mountains here in West Virginia. So can you tell us each your favorite place in the Mountain State?
Well, I'll go first, but I also want to acknowledge a question I see from one of my students, Eli, out there, and I think it's a pretty straightforward answer. What are some of the most important things that you learned early on? And to me, is you have to be a lifelong learner, and that you do a project, you learn from it, you get a bigger project, and so lifelong learning is key. My favorite place in the Mountain State at this point is my back patio. A spectacular view, and it's very relaxing in the evenings to go out and watch sunset. And so that's kind of an easy one for me.
This is an easy one for me too. And, I think Tanya and Gary were, the secret here is we're all Fairmont folks. And, for me, for a long time, I cleared out pretty much after I graduated in 1989. I had a great, opportunities, as Gary did and Tanya did as well, to kind of travel and see different things over the course of my life. But there was something, anytime I was back in Fairmont, the rest of the world just got small. And, there's just something special about being home. And whenever I was home visiting family, like the rest of the world, I could tune it out, and it felt like being a teenager again, or a young boy, just around family or familiar things, restaurants, whatever it is. So for me, it'll always be the 26554 right down the road from you there. And, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Well, thank you so much. You guys, we're so happy to have you here, and hope you come back to Vantage soon, maybe next time in person.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.